Think about the Titanic sinking. What's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, it's that incredible, dramatic image of the stern pointing straight to the sky right before it snaps in half. Well, today, we're going to dive deep and show you why that picture, as iconic as it is completely wrong.
Yeah, the sinking of the Titanic, it feels like a story we all know by heart, doesn't it? And a lot of that is thanks to those unforgettable scenes in movies. But here's the thing. Recent forensic analysis of the actual wreck tells a very different story. It suggests that dramatic, top-down breakup we all imagine, well, it probably never happened. The real story, it seems, started from the bottom up.
Okay, so first, let's just quickly go over the version of the story that's been cemented in our minds for decades.
You know the scene. It's that huge cinematic moment. The stern rises impossibly high out of that freezing water, the lights are still blazing, and then, under all that strain, the massive hull just gives way and snaps, right from the top deck downwards. It is an absolutely powerful image, no doubt about it, but it's probably more Hollywood than it is history.
So when we look back, right from the very beginning, investigators trying to piece together what actually happened that night ran into a huge problem: the eyewitness accounts. They just didn't add up.
You had the highest-ranking officer who survived, Second Officer Charles Lightoller. And at the official inquiries, he was adamant. He insisted the ship went down in one piece, intact. And for a really long time, that was the official story.
But then you have all these other accounts, right? So many passengers told a completely different story. They talked about this horrific tearing sound and said they clearly, with their own eyes, saw the ship break in two. So who do you believe? Who was right?
Well, flash forward to 1985. The wreck is finally discovered, and guess what? It's in two huge sections. So, the eyewitnesses who said it broke apart were vindicated. But the debris field was this incredibly complex, deep-sea crime scene. Finding the ship solved one mystery, but it immediately opened up a brand new one. How exactly did it break apart?
And that modern investigation, well, it led to a piece of evidence that would pretty much change everything we thought we knew about how the Titanic met its end.
So you've got these forensic teams, right? They're meticulously combing the debris field, and they find something absolutely astonishing. Huge sections of the ship's double-bottom hull, just lying there, hundreds of meters away from the main bow and stern sections. Now, this was a massive clue. You got to ask, why would the very bottom of the ship just detach so cleanly? Okay, look at this. This photograph right here. This is the smoking gun. What you're seeing is the ship's central keel bar. Think of it like its spine, and it is bent into this crazy S shape. Now, that is not the kind of damage you get when something is pulled apart. No way. This is undeniable proof of a catastrophic compressive failure. The ship wasn't torn apart from the top, it was literally crushed from the bottom up.
So how on earth could that happen? Well, the answer is hidden in the ship's own engineering.
So, picture this. The bow is filling up with water, getting heavier and heavier. That causes the stern to lift out of the ocean. As this is happening, the hull is being subjected to these just unbelievable forces. The upper decks, way up top, are being stretched. Meanwhile, the keel at the very bottom is being squeezed together or compressed.
Yeah, a good way to think about it is like this. The top of the ship was being pulled apart, kind of like a giant rubber band. At the exact same time, the bottom of the ship was being crushed and squeezed together, like an aluminum can. You've got these two opposite, incredibly extreme forces acting on the very same structure. So the big question is, where was the ship's weakest point? You might think it was at the top, but marine forensic analysis found something amazing. The upper decks were heavily reinforced. Their riveted joints had an efficiency of nearly 100%. They were built to withstand that insane tension. But, and this is the key, the riveted joints down in the keel, at the bottom, they were only about half as strong. So the weakest point wasn't at the top at all. It was right at the bottom, exactly where those crushing compressive forces were at their absolute worst.
And what's really cool is that this new theory lines up perfectly with some of the key witness testimony, like from Chief Baker Charles Joffin. I mean, this guy was one of the very last people on the stern. He talked about hearing these buckling sounds and feeling the ship list, but he never said anything about the deck splitting open in front of him. A bottom-up failure happening way down deep below his feet, it makes perfect sense of what he experienced.
So, with all this evidence in hand, we can now piece together a new and much more accurate timeline of the Titanic's final, tragic moments.
Okay, so step 1.
As the stern rises higher and higher, that compressive stress on the keel just becomes unbearable. The weaker joints finally give way, and the entire double-bottom structure literally rips away from the rest of the ship. You can only imagine the massive, gut-wrenching sound that must have made. Now, this next part is maybe the biggest change from the story we all know. With its entire structural spine just gone, the ship basically acts like a hinge at the top. The stern, instead of rising even higher, actually falls back down and settles into the water. And what's wild is that many survivors describe seeing that exact motion.
And then, finally, that completely flooded bow section acts like a giant anchor. It starts pulling the stern down with it. This completely reverses the forces. Now the upper decks are the ones under extreme tension, and that's when the final, catastrophic tear rips the two halves of the ship apart for good.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting science, but does correcting this one detail of a disaster that happened over a century ago really matter? And the answer is yes, it absolutely does. It matters for the truth, and it really matters for the people who actually lived through it.
For one, this new understanding finally validates the accounts of those survivors whose stories were basically ignored for decades. And it also rewrites the final heroic moments of the ship's engineering crew. I mean, think about it. Their station was deep inside the hull right above the keel. A bottom-up failure means they were probably the very first victims of the breakup itself, caught instantly as the entire foundation of the ship just gave way right beneath them. That is a truly tragic but crucial detail. And maybe most importantly, it just goes to show you that history isn't static. It's not set in stone. It's a living story that can be completely transformed by new technology and by people who just won't stop searching for the truth.
You know, the story of the Titanic seemed like one of those things that was just set in stone, but it wasn't. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to ponder, doesn't it? What other historical truths that we take for granted are just one deep-sea dive or one new scientific model away from being completely turned on their head?